Hey guys, welcome back to the Paladin's Alliance. By the time this video actually comes out, Blast Fall groups will still probably be going on, but EPL will be shortly after. And as I did with the last couple of seasons, I liked doing videos just weekly right before each group goes live of like one player or one team that I thought was super interesting, that I thought could be nice to do. I started it with, I believe, season 15 or season 14, where I was doing like the one to watch series and whatnot. That was really fun for me, and I'd like to just continue having that kind of repetition in this season of EPL, because we're supposed to be having a live audience for the playoffs. It's going to finally be on LAN, which is super exciting. Actually, the last season was also on LAN, but prior to that it wasn't when I started doing this. But I wanted to get into Group A, and I'll just go ahead and try to pull up who's actually in this group so you guys are aware. It is NIP, Navi, Vitality, Fnatic, Spirit, and Endpoint. So a very stacked group, all things considered. There's a lot of different players and teams that we could talk about. Navi, NIP, Vitality, I've all kind of covered them in some form or fashion in NA. I believe Fnatic as well. Spirit is still a jury on that. Endpoint, I talked about them a lot in conference. But I think the middle of the road pack slash we don't really know what to expect from them is Fnatic. And that is the video that I want to actually touch upon, the video topic that I want to touch on this week. And that is just the addition of FASHR. What does it mean for the jump ups from tier 2 to tier 1? Is it the right move? Is he the difference maker? And what can we really expect from FASHR when we head into the first group of EPL Season 16? So I think the big thing about Fnatic as a whole is trying to figure out what their identity is for the near future, because clearly they've abandoned their Swedish tendencies. They pivoted over once they brought in Alex and Mezzi to see if they could try to rein in the Swedish core. That didn't necessarily work. Brolin left the team. Crims was now the only standing member of the Fnatic Swedish core. And then you also have in the additions of keeping Mezzi as the IGL this time around instead of Alex. And then you also bring in FASHR of former Ecstatic Glory. And then you also bring in the two pieces from the successful CPH lineup of Roy and Nico Oros. And so I really like the Flames pickups. It makes sense on paper. It is a somewhat of a step up for them in terms of organizations. And Crims, keeping Crims makes a lot of sense just because of the firepower that he brings, the experience that he brings. But as you might notice in how I talk about Crims, I also think that he might be the one next on the chopping block, simply because he is the one that has been causing a lot of problems in terms of chemistry, and the reason why Alex as an IGL couldn't work out, why Smooya couldn't work out, which is a bit odd to say the least, that it could work out in the long run. However, that is just my sentiment into the move in particular. But again, I want to rein it back in and talk about why I wanted to make this video, and that's FASHR. We talked about it a lot in the NA podcast, Fi and I. We talked about it in 2.5 Talent podcast with Neo and Trav. And on paper, yeah, it's super exciting. It's a jump up for FASHR, who did absolutely fantastic on Ecstatic. This is Bird from Sky's team, if you are not actually tuned into the Tier 2 scene or whatnot. And they were actually very close to qualifying for a lot of lands. They were very close in general to doing a lot more with a little, frankly. And a lot of it had to come down to FASHR and his overperformances, or not even overperformances, just I suppose you could say overperformances within his specific role as an anchor. And you could definitely see that overall, no matter win or lose, even when they were dropping a lot of maps when they lost Wolfie, their American opera, they were still finding a lot of success in FASHR's gameplay, and he was obviously able to output a lot of frags. I believe he had a 1.15 rating overall in his time at Ecstatic. And for the roles that he was given, it's pretty impressive that was the case. And so all in all, it does make a lot of sense for him to have the jump up to Fnatic and have the opportunity to play with some big guns. And I'm not going to have too many clips to actually show you. I'll have just one clip that I want to show you probably at the very end of this video, just because I want to show you the potential that this guy has. But at the same time, I tried to actually do some demo work on him in his time on Ecstatic and his time in the open qualifiers for FNATIC so far. They had a couple of open qualifiers that they wanted to go through. They couldn't make it through the first one. They had quite a difficult bracket, all things considered. But I think that it's totally fine that they weren't able to make that first one. It was their first go around as a squad, just in general. So that makes sense. But the second time around, they did actually qualify for the RMR in Europe, in Malta now. But the way they actually got there was interesting. It wasn't an easy road by any means. I mean, you look at the on paper as to the teams that they beat. Yeah, it is on the harder side of teams, but it still should be simpler for them. They had to play against Bait, who actually qualified most recently to the RMR, and then in the third RMR qualifier. And then they beat AGO, which is also a pretty handed win. And then they had this very arduous BO3 qualification against Havu, this new Havu lineup with remnants of the old ENCE lineup, as well as other experienced veterans of the Finnish scene. I'm not really too high on this Havu roster, but regardless, it was a 16-14 win on Mirage, a 28-26 win on Nuke. And so that had me thinking. I watched that game live with Trav for a little while, and I noticed a lot of different things about how Roy's playing on this team. Sorry, not Roy. FASHR on this team. How he's playing on this FNATIC roster. Is he getting the roles that he wants? How is he doing with these roles? And whether or not it actually makes sense for him to be on this team. Is he worthy of the jump up, right? So on paper, financially, it makes a lot of sense. It's a pretty cheap buyout, I'm going to assume, from Ecstatic. I don't really think that the finances are that aggressive for Ecstatic. But for FNATIC, again, it's pretty cheap pickup. And overall, it makes sense for a guy like him who's putting out the numbers that he has to have that jump up. I think it's definitely a better move than Heap. I think he has more potential than Heap. But I think the only takeaway that I'd have and negative as far as the on paper situation is just his age. He's 26 years of age, and he's put in a lot of time into the game to get to this point. But how is his potential actually going to fare in Tier 1? Because you're probably only going to get another 3 years out of him max. And that's what I'm hoping, that age is just a number and he's still able to output frags, but he's being put into some of these teams as a quote-unquote star, although his roles don't necessarily suggest that. He's still being considered a star in terms of his numbers. So keep that in mind when I keep talking about FASHR as a whole. So I took a look at the statistics for these open qualifiers, and they're not the worst in the world. I believe, yeah, okay, here we go. A 1.11 rating in his both his open qualifiers total, which is not the worst at all. And it's mostly because he's getting absolutely pristine statistics against the likes of like an AGO and a Bait, 1.67, 1.75, and they're absolutely falling off a cliff when he actually plays against more difficult opposition. But I'll take a short little transition here and get into exactly why I think that this FASHR move has to. We should probably temper our expectations when it comes to this move. So why should we temper our expectations for him? I mean, look. So I decided to look at the matches where he played on Ecstatic and tried to pull apart what his roles were on that team and then compare it to that of the ones that he did on FNATIC. And as far as I can see, I'm seeing that a lot of these roles that he's having on Ecstatic are a lot more anchor-centric, and he has heavier rotations just because of how Tier 2 likes to play sometimes, where you can kind of commit to these rotations a lot harder. So he would be catching quick and easy kills on the rotate. He'd be going very aggressive in the anchoring positions that he would play on, and he would win these fights because he knew he was better. But on FNATIC, I do see a lot more differences in how this guy likes to approach the game, and perhaps it is a little bit of Kita and Mezzi trying to reel him in, and that makes sense in the long run. I don't think you can be as aggressive and succeed as much as you would in Tier 2 in Tier 1, and I know they have first-hand experience about that just in general. But I think the biggest notices that I had for him in general was when I watched him on Ancient. So on Ecstatic, he played against I believe, and Tropic in one of these like Pinnacle Cups or whatnot. And they won 16-14, but on the CT side, he was the B anchor, and this guy would push Banana like every round. Like he would have deep smokes, quick early grenades, and he would be facing Banana quite often. Bird from Sky would come in through cave, and they would fight and keep pincering on Banana, and he'd win these fights every single time, very regularly. And then when you had these rotates, he would come through Donut, he had a free passage into mid, and he would get a kill onto the A side bomb planter or the A side rotate. Like, so these kinds of plays are not necessarily the most replicable, just because rotations are just generally slower for these teams, because you have to be wary of lurks. You have to be wary of a lot more positional outclasses from these teams, because just the level of tactics and the level of thought processes from these players are just much higher. And on FNATIC, on these very same ancient games, they had a seeding game against K23, and you can take of that what you will. It's a seeding game; it doesn't necessarily matter. But at the same time, you can get a lot out of just the tendencies and the way he's playing. So his site-mate in this case was Roy, which is definitely an upgrade from Bird from Sky. I believe Roy was playing a little bit more cave-centric, a little bit more rotatey angles. And this time, FASHR is playing the more Bianca roles again. But the difference with this is that he is playing much more passively. He's playing much more crossfire heavy. And for this, his output of frags are much lower. He's not actually searching for these frags, so he's working more for 1 or 2 frags. And while that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, he's going to have the flashiest number of statistic jumps, right? And keep the same statistics as he did on Ecstatic. At the same time, he is still going to have to kind of rejig his identity. He's going to have to understand that, look, he can't necessarily go that aggressive this time around. He's going to have to find 1 kill, a half kill, and basically make sure that these retakes are viable. The whole point about these anchor positions is that when you go into the retake, is it a man advantage situation that the team can put in the risk and the resources to actually go for those rounds, right? And I think having to reanalyze what FASHR is going to do in these rounds is probably the most important about his identity. And I don't think we can definitely say that out the gates at EPL, he's going to be the difference maker. He's going to be a rock for this team, because it's just going to be difficult to have that conversion. So that is one big thing that I need you guys to know when looking at this guy. Another big thing is on Nuke. A huge issue that I was noticing is that he doesn't necessarily know what he's doing on T side. I believe, let's see actually the teams that he played on Nuke in particular. Yeah, it was that Havu game. That Havu game that he went 30 and 37 on. It was a 28-26 game of just back and forth CS. It was going on very late. And you can make an argument that, hey, since it was going as late as it was, maybe they were just a lax play all around. But I think just identity-wise, he just didn't have a much of an idea of what he wanted to do on lobby T side. So he was given lobby as his basically his positioning on T side. He wasn't necessarily too confident on taking hut peeks. If he did, he was kind of just shoulder peeking. He didn't necessarily go in with any of these players that are going on a ramp. He was very dedicated to watching Squeak. But even on Squeaky Door, he would have a lot of rounds where he would just be caught out with nades in his hand because he didn't understand the timing of when these smokes would fade, of when the nades just kick up of smoke would fade away, when these mollies could be seen over, when the spams could come in through vent door, and just all of these things, these little details was really struggling for FASHR. And I think there were a lot of missed lurks as well, where he would over peek and he would try to commit just screaming through smokes. That can't work through tier 1. That can't work through these open qualifiers. And he was getting punished quite regularly. So the T side of things, I think just in general across the board of out of all the FNATIC maps, I think it needs a lot of work in, and that is going to obviously be the biggest jump up for any tier 2 to tier 1 player, right? Is that how are you going to play in these systems, and how are you going to play when the CT angles are just razor sharp and razor tight, and people understand every little nuance when it comes to this game? How are you going to break through that and fit within a system? That is super important, and I think Nuke was a big accentuation as to what the issues with FASHR are out the gates. Aim-wise, He's still doing decently. I don't think I had any qualms with that. He was still able to get that 1 kill, that 1.5 kill. On Nuke in particular, though, I had a couple of qualms with him on CT side Nuke. And I think that him topside anchoring is always going to be difficult. We saw issues with that on Vitality with Masuta and with Kyojin. It's not going to be the easiest conversion and the easiest time for some of these players to just easily have that transition. But I saw a couple of flashes. I'm not going to say that I was blown away from FASHR, all things considered, but I think that I saw enough to suggest that there's some framework here that can be worked with. But overall, in that Havu game, I was disappointed. He didn't do the best, and even on Ecstatic, he kind of struggled. It's going to have to be a process for Mezzi and Kita, but I need to see a lot more from him on the CT side because he's got a very, very important role, and he's going to have to output a certain number of frags in order for me to be satisfied. So the last little bit of maps that I wanted to actually go over with you guys is Overpass, but I will actually transition here and show you a clip that I had. I know Trav has shown it before. It's a very flashy one, but it is just generally what I think about FASHR and the potential that he has. I've been a little negative about FASHR overall, but I want to show you the upside that it might have with FASHR as a whole. So as I was mentioning about the ancient stuff that FASHR was outputting on Ecstatic, where he would go very aggressive into Banana, and he would be very aggressive in general as an anchor, all things considered, is just a very difficult thing to balance in Tier 1, and to find that balance in general is just a very difficult thing to do. And I'm sure Bird from Sky understood FASHR to such an extent that he could do this regularly. But on FNATIC, I didn't necessarily see that largely throughout any of their CT sides. So here on Overpass, this flashy clip that I have here is kind of the framework and the aggressiveness that I hope that FNATIC allows FASHR to do moving forward. Because if that's the case, then hey, you've got another aggressive piece to kind of push and pull with whenever you choose to. And it allows a lot of these maps to have a little bit more gusto to them. On FNATIC, on an Overpass, you have aggressive short control. Well, then hey, you can have a little bit more leniency to rotate over to A and go a little bit more aggressive on long side. On Ancient, you go aggressive down Banana and you have that cave crunch onto lane. You can have quick rotates on over to mid and kind of bunker that down as well. So on all of these little maps that I've discussed here, it just brings up the kind of flair that these CT sides can have, and it makes FNATIC that much more dangerous. So let me just play the clip out and just actually showcase to you what FASHR did so well against Falcons, and why they were able to pull this game with such a huge deficit back as close as they possibly could. So I believe they went like 0-8 in the hole against Falcons here, but this round was kind of the kickstart for FNATIC to kind of at least have a half of a comeback. So he throws his standard util here, but he instantly smokes this Molotov so that he can sit behind it very early on and try to get a cheeky first kill. They get a boost up on his sandbags as well. NBK, it's always going to be a CT favorite angle. There is no chance for a trade, and they immediately fall back. And now, under normal circumstances in that original Ancient clips that I've seen, he would probably play a little bit more passive here, play the man advantage. Overpass is one of the maps where you would love to soak in that man advantage and just bleed the clock down, bleed the utility out from the T's. But in this situation, FASHR wants to push the issue. He rolls back to the time that he played on Ecstatic and forces that identity upon FNATIC and Falcons as well. So as soon as this flash comes in, I believe he has a flash into boot. So this re-aggression catches Masuta off completely unawares. And in this case, again, he can try to fall back and play the man advantage as well. But again, he wants to push the issue. Only 7 bullets left in his chamber, and he doesn't want to actually give away his position. But you'll see here, he uses only 5 bullets on Hadji and then flicks on over to Python in connector with one just straight to the dome. And look at this, just an absolute masterclass performance from FASHR, and I believe he does get the ace here as well onto the final player of Maka in connector. Yeah, he misses a shot there. But look, the whole reason why I think this clip is amazing is not necessarily because of how flashy that little one tap was, but the aggression and the re-aggression that FASHR is willing to put in on FNATIC, in particular in this round. So if they let him off the leash a little bit more, if they understand that push and pull that Bird from Sky was able to master on Ecstatic, then perhaps FASHR could be the difference maker on this team. But if that isn't the case, well, then you're not going to have those aggressive pieces that you might be expecting and hoping to have on some of these malleable CT sides that FNATIC have. So I'm expecting that Kita and Mezzi understand some of these strengths that FASHR have and try to output them further on down the road in EPL. So there isn't as much like hardcore analysis in terms of like actual clips like I did with that overpass one, but I still wanted to do the same work that I've done on every video where I do a lot of demo work. And on as far as the negative ones are concerned, the negative aspects of FASHR are concerned, I didn't want to just put them on full blast there. And it's more of an overarching idea that I wanted to actually showcase here. But overall, I am super excited to see FASHR get the jump up. He has been a guy that's been grinding for quite some time. Even in losses, he's been putting up very formidable ratings, all in all. And I have high hopes for FASHR. And FNATIC in general is a team that I don't really know where to put in terms of world rankings, in terms of contending for titles again, because as a whole, FNATIC is an organization that's always been a championship contending one, and ever since they've gone international, they haven't had that same level of success, right? And so I've been super down on FNATIC and just their ideas. Putting Mezzi as an IGL, I'm still not completely confirmed on that. I don't think that's the best role for Mezzi, especially when you have Alex on the bench. But FASHR could be a big deal for FNATIC if they are able to understand the strengths of FASHR, that being the ability to go aggressive on some more CT favored angles on some of these maps and let him off the leash here or there to get those man advantages, even though you have aggressive opping in Nico Odos. But if they aren't able to do that and they allow him to just play the crossfires, play for these 1 or 1.5 kills, it's going to be difficult because, as we saw on Nuke, I don't think that he necessarily has enough longevity to do that. His topside anchoring was left a lot to be desired, and I think I need a lot more from him to learn that side of his gameplay in order for me to say, okay, we can commit to that side of FASHR. But until then, what I've seen from him seems to me that the more aggressive side of him and tempering that alongside Mezzi makes the most sense as a whole. So all in all, I'm quite happy with just the signs of life that I'm seeing with him out of the gates. It's just a question of whether or not they can actually replicate that long term, and especially against the tier 1 opposition that's going to be in his groups. Look, this group is going to be very difficult to get out of. I won't be surprised if they don't get out of it, but if there's going to be a difference maker that needs to get them out, it's going to be FASHR. So that's going to do it for this video here. I loved doing just talking to the camera sometimes, adding and sprinkling a little bit of clips here and there. FNATIC as a whole is going to be exciting to see. EPL is going to be a very long tournament, but we're going to have some exciting little bits and bobs to see in the playoffs as well with a live audience. A little bit more to give than the studio environment that we had in Season 15. But yeah, I mean, thank you for all the support. The NA podcast is doing very well. I'm glad that I'm getting a lot of great support for that. It's been a very enjoyable time to do it with alongside Fi. Fi's been loving the support as well. So thank you guys for everything. I will see you guys for the next group. I believe we'll probably have that alongside the NA videos. They'll probably be coming out in tandem, so you'll probably have just 2 videos interspersed over your earlier side of the week so you can enjoy EPL in the second half. But hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. Subscribe as well. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.